Aim 1 is what defines Oxfam interventions on economic justice and on sustainable livelihoods. I will not go into the details because the ones that are not well acquainted with what Aim 1 is will have the chance in the next session to visit and to hear the presentation, to have a dialogue with all the, the country programs that are present here, and therefore to interact with them. But just to set the stage very briefly, the Aim 1 was for the between 2010 and 2015. Currently sets all the strategies for intervening in sustainable livelihoods, and it sets around 4 working streams and 2 critical challenges. The 4 working streams are around building women's livelihood resilience and leadership, facilitating the right to food and enabling agricultural growth in the face of climate change, creating fair and sustainable markets, and addressing urban poverty and rural-urban linkages. But then there are 2 very important critical challenges. The first one is about achieving gender justice, and the second one is managing climate change and other risks. We cannot and we can no longer guarantee that the sustainability of our livelihood and improved livelihood strategies can be sustainable if we do not achieve, and manage these 2 critical risks. If we look at gender justice, it's the barriers and inequalities around gender. It's very clear that they are one of the greatest barriers, I would say, to development in general and to economic development more specifically. And again, if we don't address the long-term and challenges related to climate change, and if we don't address the vulnerability related to certain type of shocks, so more sudden changes, that we won't have sustainability in those interventions. As a regional livelihoods team, we consider that we have provided an important contribution to the global livelihoods, framework that has been released just a few months back. And I think that the main contributions that we've provided has been around, putting really women at the center of what we do. So having a very clear focus on how we can achieve gender justice in livelihoods intervention. And this has been done through the same network and presented last year in Guatemala with an interesting work that we developed together with Yenny and other colleagues. And if you want, you can find the outcomes of last year's learning cycle outside on display. We are experiencing as well a very clear shift from a more production-oriented type of livelihood intervention to working with farmers on a more complex set of issues, tackling at the same time production, markets, community development, how those interventions link with type of public sector advocacy, as well as with markets, as we've seen, and working as far as possible on all the different livelihoods capital we have to deal with. We are starting very seriously to look and analyzing at what is the rural-urban linkages and how we can start intervening more and more on urban livelihoods, responding as well to what is a reality in the Caribbean, in Latin America in general, all the very rapid urbanization and of the vulnerability of the one that settles in slums and marginal areas in cities. And of course, as I was mentioning before, being probably the ones to push an agenda in which gender in livelihood is not looked at only from an economic lens, but in which we say that the economic lens can be an important driver, but we should be able to look as well at what are the implications at household level, in terms of behaviors, in terms of practices, and at the social and political level, so in terms of leadership as well. When we refer to managing climate change and other risks, I think that, and we will hear more tomorrow, I think we will have a session with Chris when we will try to discuss more about how we brought forward as well adaptation and risk reduction into livelihood. but one key point is that the new livelihood strategies of Oxfam recognize how in the past, I think as we've been discussing in the probably yesterday and in the last few days with the ones that were already here, the trickle-down effect that was expected by many economic intervention was not happening. And one of the reasons has been because certain vulnerabilities were not addressed. So in this new approach, we have to make sure that we look not only at certain producers groups, but we are able to look at the community in which they live, and we are able to tackle different risks, economic, environmental related ones, social ones. Then apart from that, I think that it's important, mostly I would say for Oxfam staff and for the partner organizations we work with at country level, all these work streams and challenges would not be addressed if we wouldn't tackle certain ways of working, certain ways of approaching communities, partners, and as we've seen, governments, private sector. And around that, the new strategy is quite specific on what are the dimension of the ways of working, of implementing the strategy that should be present. And some of them, I think, are really part of all the livelihood programs in lack of their DNA. And so we see in the strategy facilitation and brokering, and we're going to see during this week, probably the most extreme approach that we've taken, trying to innovate and try to, see up to what level we can bring that approach. Identifying and capitalizing on emerging opportunities, and therefore taking few risks to be able to innovate. And it's not always easy, and we're going to see during the week as well what are, I would say mostly in the evening sessions, what are the challenges that might create barriers to that type of innovation. Linking advocacy and long-term development, and I think there are few very important examples in the region, or now from a programmatic approach, we have managed in some cases even to change policies from a formal point of view. So like laws that have been enacted and policies that have been changed. Using new media, and we're trying to do that, and I invite all of you to register in the website where you will find as well all the presentations, and that will be part as well of the discussion on Friday, on where just with the LAC team we're going to discuss how the learning network will move forward. So this was just to give you a few points of reflection for the questions and the dialogue you will have with country teams in the next session.